Hi folks, my name's Ashley. I'm one of the founders of Skira, and in this video I'm going to show you the basics of using JavaScript coding in Construct. So in this video I'm not going to teach you how to learn the JavaScript programming language itself. I'll assume that you have some knowledge of JavaScript to begin with. If you do want a beginner's guide to learning JavaScript, we do have the Learn JavaScript in Construct 13-part free tutorial series, which we've had some great feedback on. So you can use this to learn how to get started with the JavaScript programming language from the very beginning. It assumes no coding knowledge to begin with and will take you through to the basics of the JavaScript programming language. And as you can see, we've some great comments on that, so do check that out if you want to learn JavaScript from scratch. But in this video I will assume that you have some working knowledge of JavaScript. There is also TypeScript support worth mentioning, so if you prefer static typing and you want better autocomplete support, that is possible using TypeScript. But in this video I'll assume that we're just going to stick to JavaScript, and so I won't mention TypeScript any further. We do have another video and another guide on that, so check those out if you want to learn more about that. Right, to get started I'll just show you a very simple basic demo of using JavaScript in Construct, and I'll start by calling a line of JavaScript from an event sheet. So here I have a sample project with just a button which says show message and an event sheet with a event block which says when that button is clicked. And when that button is clicked I'm going to add a script, so this will add a line of JavaScript that will be run when that button is clicked. And I'm going to use the alert function, which is a simple browser method to show a pop-up message. And traditionally, when you learn to program, the first message you show is hello world. So there we have it. We have our first line of JavaScript in Construct. It's designed to be really easy to get started like that. So you can just dip your toe in the water with a tiny bit of JavaScript in an event sheet, and that makes it very easy to get going with JavaScript. Now if I preview the project and click the button, that will run that line of code, and now I get the pop-up alert dialog which says hello world. There we have it. That's our first line of JavaScript code running inside Construct. Now you can of course add JavaScript files, so an entire script, which I've just done from the project bar. There's the scripts folder and I've added a script. When you add your first script, Construct adds a bit of template code because this is generally useful, but in this case I'm not going to use it. So I'm going to demonstrate how you can call a function from a script file from an event sheet. So this is a good way to start using more JavaScript code and integrating it with event sheets as well. So in this JavaScript file I'm going to add a function called show message. And I'll take a string parameter called message, and I'll use alert again, and I'll just prefix it with a string saying my message, and then show the message after that. So now I want to call this function from the event sheet. Now this brings us to an important point about the way JavaScript files work in Construct. JavaScript files are JavaScript modules, and these work slightly differently to classic scripts, as they may be called, the older version which aren't using modules. And an important detail about modules is everything in the file is in its own scope. So in the past you may have used JavaScript, and you may have found that if you have a script file like this with a function called show message in it, you can just call that somewhere else merely by calling the function like that, assuming it's in global scope. But this doesn't work in Construct or anything else using JavaScript modules, because modules have their own scope. This function can only be used within the script file. So this won't work. I'll show you what happens. If you click the button, nothing happens, and if you want to see the error message, of course the first place to check is the browser console. In Chrome I press F12 to open that, and I go to the console, and you can see reference error, show message is not defined, because that's not accessible to the JavaScript in the event sheet. So how do we make it accessible? there's two ways of doing this. There's the quick hack way, and then there's the good way using modules. I'll just show you an easy way to work around this, and it's using global functions. So a way around this is you can add it onto the global namespace, which using modern JavaScript, if I can spell it correctly, uses the global this, which is essentially the same as window or self or global, depending on whichever environments you've used before. Global this is the modern standard way to refer to the global object in JavaScript. So now this adds a global function called showMessage, and then in the event sheet I can also call the global function showMessage, and now that will work because they are both accessing the same thing. There we go. Now the alert appears because it's calling a global function. That's not the way I'd recommend doing this. The way I'd recommend doing this is to use JavaScript modules, and that means using import and export. So let's just put this back to how it was. So at the moment, this function is essentially private to this file. It can't be used anywhere else unless you add the word export. So now this is a JavaScript module which exports the function showMessage, so anything else can import that function and call it. But now we have a problem. We can't write an import in the script block in an event sheet. The reason for that is this is actually inside a function, this code. I'll show you that later on, and the JavaScript language doesn't allow imports inside of a function. So we have to solve this problem a different way. The way we do this in Construct is with a special script called imports for events. So I'll add a script to do that now. I'll rename it imports for events. And you have to tell Construct that's what you want to use this script for using the purpose property. So now I'll set the purpose to imports for events. And now I can import the showMessage function. And the way you do that is by importing showMessage from the script main.js. Now, because the imports for events script import showMessage, I can now use showMessage in any script in any event sheet. So now this script block here can call showMessage. And now if I preview the project and I click showMessage, there we go. The alert appears and it's working as we want it to. Now, I said I'd show you how this works under the hood earlier. So again, I can open the browser developer tools, and what happens when you do this is Construct generates a file called scripts-in-events.js, and if I just scroll to the top, you can see here that the import in the imports for events script is there. And then the line of code I wrote in an event sheet is there. So you can see here it imports the showMessage function, and then further down here it calls the showMessage function. And as I said before, because this is in a function, an async function, you cannot import there. So you have to import at the top level, and that's what the imports for events script purpose does. So the reason you have to do all of this is because scripts in event sheets is a concept unique to Construct. Other JavaScript environments don't have anything equivalent. So we've set up this this way to make sure that you can use imports and exports with your scripts in event sheets. So there's a little bit of setting up you have to do, but once you get used to it, it won't be a problem. It's quite straightforward. Okay, so that's the basics of using JavaScript modules in Construct. They're a great way to organize your code, so you can have reusable modules which export all sorts of useful things, and then you can easily reuse those across other projects. Now let's start integrating a bit more closely with Construct. What I'll do, I'll add a global variable and I'll access that from the JavaScript code. So I'm adding a global variable in the event sheet here. I'm going to call it myGlobal, and I'm going to initialize it with the number 123, because it's easy to recognize. And now an important thing to note here is that this event sheets sort of exist in a different world to JavaScript. When I add a global variable to an event sheet, it's not actually adding a global variable in JavaScript code. It's sort of operating in its own world. And so to access the global variable in the event sheet from JavaScript, you have to use a special method. And I'll show you how that works now. So I'm going to show in the message the value of the global variable. I'm going to use a template string because that's a nice way to put strings together. And I'm going to say my global is, and then I'll put the value of the global variable here. And the way to do that is most of things that you access in construct from JavaScript are via a special parameter called runtime, which is available in every single script in event sheets and is also passed to script files a slightly different way. And in the runtime object, there's the global vars, short for global variables property, and inside that is every global variable in every event sheet in the project. And you can see it's auto completing it here. That's the name of this global variable here in the event sheet. So now if I preview this project, it should show the value of the global variable. And there we have it. We can see that my global is 123. I'll just show you how you can also modify the global variable. Similarly, you can say runtime.globalvars.myglobal and increment it. And now every time I click the button, it'll add 1 to the number before showing the message. So that's 124. And if I keep showing the message, the number keeps increasing. So that demonstrates the basics of how you can interoperate JavaScript and event sheets. And it's the important thing is that you access most of Construct's own APIs through the special variable named runtime. Okay, let's move along to another demo. I'll close this project, and next up I'll just show how you can modify objects through JavaScript code. So what I've got here is, again, it's a very simple button click style demo, and there's a sprite object here, which is our favorite piggy character that we like to use in our demos. And the important thing here is, again, we access the object through runtime. And this time, runtime.objects is where all the object types and families in the project are. It's the sort of the namespace for them all. So everything that appears under object types in the project bar will be available under runtime.objects. And so runtime.objects.piggy refers to this sprite object. And you've got to remember a common mistake is that object types and object instances are different. Piggy can have 10 instances of the sprite object type. So this doesn't itself have an x and y coordinate, only its instances do. And because there's only one instance, we call the getFirstInstance method, and that gives us the instance that we see in the layout here, which has an x and y coordinate that we can then modify. So then the next line of code that adds 50 to the x coordinate of the piggy instance, and that will move it to the right an amount. And if I preview the project, you can see that every time I click the button, it moves the sprite to the right. So that demonstrates how you can use JavaScript code to access construct objects and then modify them. So this is the basis of the way that you can manipulate construct objects through JavaScript code. I'll move on to a slightly more complex demo again, and this time I'm going to use JavaScript code to control a sprite. So if I preview this, you can see that I'm pressing the arrow keys and the sprite is moving around depending on which arrow key I press. Let's take a look at the JavaScript code for this. If I open the main script file, so this time I'm using a script file instead of a script in an event sheet, and this is just one file, so we don't have to worry about imports or exports here. It's just a small amount of code in a file instead of in an event sheet. The way JavaScript files work is there's a special method called run on startup which Construct provides, and then this gives you the first access to the special runtime variable, which I highlighted earlier. So Construct uses the same kind of event handling system that browsers do. So we add an event listener for the tick event, and so every tick it will call this function and run all of this code here. And that makes this code here very much like code within a every tick event block in an event sheet. So the way this works is it will obtain the player instance. So remember, that's the first instance of the player object type, not just the object type itself. It obtains delta time, which is the time in seconds since the previous frame, and that allows frame rate independence. And there's also the special runtime.keyboard, which gives access to keyboard input. And then basically check which arrow key is down. So if the right arrow key is down, then it will move the player to the right according to the speed and applying delta time for frame rate independent movement. And it also sets the angle to 0, which is pointing to the right. So the angle of the object will also match its direction of movement. And then it repeats that for moving left, but subtracting from the x coordinate, and then also moving down, which adds to the y coordinate, and for moving up, which subtracts from the y coordinate. And in every case, it changes the angle to point in the correct direction. And so that's how we have basic movement from JavaScript code in Construct. So that shows you how you can begin to develop the basics of gameplay mechanics using JavaScript code. So now I'm going to jump up to a slightly more complex example, which is the Spellcaster code demo. So this is basically a port to JavaScript code of one of our simple construct examples, Spellcaster, which is made using event blocks and behaviors. But this version is running purely on JavaScript code written in Construct. So you can see it's a simple top-down shooter style game where when I click it shoots out a orange spell, which can be used to make the goblins return to the dimension from which they came, with some flashes effects as well. So let's see how this is made in JavaScript. One thing I'll point out about this example is it uses JavaScript for everything. No behaviors are used at all. So in practice, you might want to still use behaviors just because it simplifies things. For example, to use the bullet behavior for the projectiles. But this demo uses JavaScript code for everything in order to demonstrate that you can use JavaScript coding to replicate all of your gameplay mechanics if you want to. You don't have to use behaviors or event blocks. There are no event sheets in this project. It's entirely done with JavaScript. So that's the purpose of this example. Now, one thing to note again about JavaScript modules is that Construct will only load the main script. There's 5 script files here, and Construct will only load itself the script with the purpose main script, and that appears in bold in the project bar. All other scripts are only loaded if you import them. So the main script here, you can see it will import, for example, gamemethods.js, that's this file, and only when it does that will it then load that file and run the code inside of it. So again, this is using JavaScript modules to nicely organize how all the code in the project works. So if I open gamemethods.js, you can see that it's exporting some functions. Others it doesn't export because they're only needed within this script file, such as movePlayer, because that's called up here in a function which is exported. So that exports a function called tick, and it also exports a couple of other functions for input handling, and it's got all sorts of logic for things like checking if the spell projectile has collided with a goblin, and then it will run this code here when that happens. If I return to the main script, you can see it imports all that as game methods, and then you can see calls to the exported methods here. There's a couple of other script files. There's a script file, this is a module used for global variables essentially, so this is just a way to better organize your global variables rather than putting them on a very crowded JavaScript global namespace. And there's also a script file here for representing all the goblin enemies in the game. This uses a feature called subclassing, where we can create our own custom class to represent each of the goblin instances in the project. This is a sort of an area unto itself. I'll just very quickly cover it. It allows us to extend the built-in goblin type, which is basically a generic sprite object, and then we can add our own methods such as move and destroy with spark flash. That's just a helper method to when one of the goblins is defeated. And if I go to game methods, you can see how that custom method in our own class is called from one of the goblin instances. So that's a really good way to extend the features Construct provides with your own game-specific logic. There's one other script here, which is some general utilities, and you can see there's some general math utility functions here, and these are all exported as well. And as I've said before, one of the great things about JavaScript modules is this makes it really easy to reuse. You can copy and paste this script file into a different project and import all the things it exports again and reuse all of this logic here. So you don't have to rewrite all your code to, for example, calculate how to rotate an angle towards another angle. So it's great for reusability and organizing all your code. Now, one of the great things about browser development is you get access to all the browser's sophisticated development tools. I'll just very quickly demonstrate how that works. So if I preview the project, and as I demonstrated earlier, you can press F12 and access all the browser development tools. And there's all sorts of tools here: performance profiling, memory analysis, network analysis, and so on and so forth. The two really important ones are the console, where you can log messages and where error messages will appear, and the sources tab, which is where you can see all your JavaScript files. And this is very useful because you have access to the debugger. And I'll just demonstrate quickly what you can do with it, the sorts of things you can do to help understand how your code is working and how to solve problems. So you can see here in the debugger on preview.construct.net, it's got all the script files that are in the project, including gamemethods.js that we were looking at just a moment ago. And here's the function check spell hit goblin that we were looking at earlier. And what I can do is I can set a breakpoint. So when one of the spells collides with the goblin, I can set a breakpoint inside of that, and the debugger will stop and pause the application when that happens. And let's see what happens when I do that. So if I find a goblin and I fire a spell at it, as soon as it hits the goblin, the debugger stops, the game is paused, and I can take a look around and see the value of different variables. That's the goblin instance. That's the spell instance. You can click on its properties to see what they are, and you can see the value of things like global variables. And there's all sorts of ways of taking a look around this current state of your code, and this is just an incredibly valuable tool. If you get used to using this, you'll wonder how you ever lived without it. And you can run your code step by step, line by line. I'm pressing F10 to do that now, and so you can see how the state of the code changes as each line of code is run. So now the goblin speed's been incremented to 81, and I can see that's a change that's happened after that line of code was run. And you can remove the breakpoint and then resume, and the game will carry on as it was before. Another great tool is being able to log to the console, so you can log your own messages about what's going on, and it will appear here in the console. That's also a very useful additional technique. I've only scratched the surface of what you can do with the developer tools there, but that's the basics and it's well worth learning, especially because these are all industry standard tools. JavaScript is an industry standard programming language. If you get a job doing web development, you'll be using the same language and the same kinds of developer tools. So these are really, really great things to learn. We're not doing construct specific languages or tools here. This is all same thing that we used to build construct itself, in fact. Okay, so that's a brief tour of the ways that you can use JavaScript in Construct. We have loads more examples. If you go to the example browser and you filter by the scripting tag, all of these examples use JavaScript. So if you want to learn more about how to use JavaScript in Construct, this is a great place to look. You can do things like coding with audio using the Web Audio API. There's collision handling code examples. You can integrate custom canvases and do your own rendering with those. There's another example of imports and exports you can have a look at. And you can access pathfinding, effect parameters, tweens, all from JavaScript coding. You can do fun things like sound synthesis and even access web workers and run custom code on a separate thread, which will run in parallel and make use of multi-core CPUs, and integrate YouTube. You know, there's endless things you could do with JavaScript and Construct. It's a really powerful feature, and as I said, you'll be learning real-world skills which you can get a job in future should you want to go further. That's just about it for this video. There's also the scripting reference, so if you want to see a comprehensive reference of all the APIs available in Construct through things like the runtime property, that's the iRuntime interface. And here you can see every single property and method that you can access through that, including the events it fires and how they all work. So this is a great place to look if you want to know what kind of properties and methods are available. Take a look at the reference there and that will explain how everything works. That's it for this video. Do take a look at TypeScript support if you're interested in that. You can also use external code editors like VS Code with Construct. We'll link to another guide on that. And there's plenty more that you can do with JavaScript. So we hope you enjoy using this feature. Take a look at JavaScript coding in Construct, and we hope you have fun with it. As ever, there's more on the way, so stay tuned for more updates in future Construct releases. We're always adding more features and more APIs to Construct, so do stay up to date with all of that. Thanks, and we hope you enjoy using Construct.